That night, Gretchen lay in bed. She knew what she needed to rest, but her mind was at anything but at rest. What a day it had been. The day at school had been an absolute disaster. It had begun as a pretty normal day. She had been learning and getting in good review in class. Since she was a perfectionist, it was important to her that her grades be perfect. She had felt pretty good about what she had been able to accomplish in the classroom that day, and it had been wonderful to see her friends at recess to give her mind a good break. When Bob had given her that gift, she had no idea that it would take this wonderful day and turn it upside down. Now it had been more than ruined. She didn't think she would be able to wear those clothes ever again. That smell was something that she would never be able to forget, she was sure. Having forgotten if there were any assignments, had been the topping of a cake that nobody would ever want to eat. What had happened in the woods was something that she would not allow herself to forget, and therefore not get any sleep that night also. Now, not only was her mind nagging at her because of the fact that she was probably completely unprepared for school the next day, but now the horror of what she had seen was overpowering every good thought that she could possibly even imagine of thinking. With little hope of restful sleep that night, she lay in bed, staring at the ceiling. She hated nights like this one. Nights when she was terrified of every sound that she heard or thought that she heard. Shadows on the walls, although probably harmless, sent shivers down her spine. The wind outside, moving through the trees, made such a noise that she imagined was created with no other purpose than to terrorize her every thought. Those were the same trees that she had been among earlier that day. No matter what she tried to think about to ease her mind, her imagination would take her back to those woods. The trail had seemed peaceful. Nothing had seemed wicked or scary about it. In her thoughts, she kept seeing that tree. The harder she tried not to think about it, she just kept thinking about it. It was the tree that leaned, of course. It was the tree that marked the spot of that abandoned trail of years before that led to that dreadful spot where she had seen it. Her mind had her back there again, replaying over and over what had happened. She had lifted that part of the brush and peeked through. There it stood. It was an abandoned cabin that had not been lived in for a long time. How long? Probably as long as the trail that took her to it had not been used. The first time she had come upon it, she thought it was marvelous. It presented another fun place in the woods for her and her friends to be able to play. How many kids had their very own secret log cabin, after all? The cabin was made of old logs and was overgrown with vines. She imagined that when it was not as old as it was probably quite a cozy place. Numbers of questions were raised in her mind. How old was it? Who had lived in it? What were those people that had lived in it like? Were there children? She could only imagine. That what the answers to her questions might be. But it was going to be a fun place for sure. All of the wonderful ideas and possibilities of what this place could be with her and her friends were destroyed in a moment, however. When it had happened, she realized that it may have been better if she had just never found the place. She could have continued playing in the woods without fear, had she never known that the place was there. It had ruined her fun. Later, however, she thought that it was probably for the best that she had found it. If there is a danger somewhere and you don't know about it, it becomes even more dangerous because you don't know how to look for it. But she knew. And after what she had seen happen at that cabin that day a year ago and again today, she knew. There was no mistaking it. That was a place that must be avoided at all costs. That night, as Frank lay in bed, he was confused. He didn't know what to think. He was in trouble for something he did not do. His parents did not believe him. His teacher did not believe him. The principal did not believe him. This was horrible. And on top of all of this, he seemed to have lost his best friend. Bob was the guilty person, he knew. And for some strange reason, Bob had set him up. and made him look guilty. Sure, there had been plenty of times that he and Bobob had worked together to do something foolish, but this was not one of those times. This time he was innocent. He tried to think if there was something that he had done to upset Bobob. Why would he want to do this? He couldn't think of one thing. As far as he knew, he and Bobob had been just fine. Just a couple days before all this had happened, Bobob had helped him memorize some of his spelling words. Frank had told him that his dad had made a special deal with him that if he were to get a good grade on the test, he could have a pet. His confusion slowly turned to anger. Bobob had done more than ruin his day. He had destroyed his chance to get the one thing he had wanted for so long. And this was not acceptable behavior. He was over having his feelings hurt by Bobob's actions. Bobob had started a war, and Frank knew exactly what he was going to do to get even. Nighttime was there, and Bobob was in his bed. He listened carefully to all the noises in his house. He could hear his parents down the hall. There were familiar sounds of the running water as they tried to do things like brush their teeth and get ready for bed. After a few minutes, he heard the light switch being turned off, and then nothing. Now, nothingness was the sound he had been waiting for. That was the sound that meant his parents were in bed and would soon be asleep if they were not already. He sat up in his bed to prevent himself from falling asleep. He needed to stay awake as he waited for Billy. He really had been dreading whatever Billy was up to at first. Why had he agreed to sneak out of the house? But the more he thought about it, the more it sounded like it would be okay. He had a strange way of being able to rationalize things in his mind. Something that he knew was completely wrong could be made to sound okay if he thought about it long enough. Who knows? Whatever Billy wanted to show him could lead to fun. And he had said that it wouldn't take very long. He should be able to go with Billy and be back home in his bed before his parents ever knew that he was gone. It would be fine. Not wanting to risk any extra noise, he waited by the window. About 10 minutes later, he saw something moving in the backyard. It was Billy. Bobob opened the window and swung his leg around to climb out. Billy came over to greet him. "Hey, Bobob," he whispered. Bobob took care to close the window quietly and then answered his friend. "What's up? So, where are we going?" "You'll see. You're going to love it. It's really cool. Follow me." And Bobob did just that. Billy led him out of his yard and through the neighbor's backyard. It felt very scary and exciting all at the same time. All it would take to get caught would be for one person to look out a window and see two fifth graders outside in the middle of the night. This made the sight of the woods all the more welcome to Bobob. When they got into the woods, it would be more difficult for someone to see them. Once they were there, Billy led them down a trail. "Be careful," he said. "There could be branches in the way, and you wouldn't want to step on a snake." "Ah, I hate snakes," Bobob said. "Oh, you'll live," said Billy as he laughed a little bit. Their voices were now louder than before because they felt safe from discovery. Billy and Bobob continued to walk through the woods for another 10 minutes or so. Bobob, who was under the impression that this was supposed to be a quick trip, was starting to get worried. What if his parents were to go look in his room for some reason? He was just about to voice his concerns when Billy spoke up. "We're almost there. It's over here." "What is it?" "You'll see. Check it out," said Billy as he pushed through a huge hedge of untrimmed bushes. Bobob followed him through, and just before him, visible only because of the moonlight, stood what appeared to be an old, vine-covered log cabin. And that's the end of the chapter.